Hello there, and welcome to this video on adding and subtracting rational expressions. So in previous videos we've looked at simplifying rational expressions, and we've also done multiplying and dividing. But now we're going to do adding and subtracting, which is a little bit more difficult. So these are going to be our steps. So step one, you're going to factor numerator and denominator. That was the same as in all the other work that we've done. And then step two, same again, state restrictions on the variables. Then if you can, you're going to try to simplify, and I'm going to do a simple example of this over here first. Then what you'll do is you'll find a common denominator, and that is going to cause the numerators to change. And then you can add or subtract the numerators depending on the sign. And then lastly, simplify if possible at the end. So we're going to do a simple example up here where we have a half plus 3/9. So this doesn't have any variables in there, but you're going to use the exact same steps. So what you want to do first is factor everything. So 9 you could factor down into, say, 3 times 3. And now that I see we have 3 and a 3, one of those 3's can actually cancel with the numerator. So that is what we're doing right here. We're simplifying if possible. So once I've done that simplifying, I'm just going to write out what we have. A half plus 1 over, there's just a 3 in the denominator. So to add these, we actually need a common denominator. So now we'd be in step 4 here. We got to find a common denominator. And to do that, you just basically multiply by whatever's missing from the other one. So this one's got a 2, but the other one doesn't have a 2. So I'm going to go times by 2. But if I do that in the denominator, I also have to do it in the numerator. And then with this one, it's got a 3, but this one doesn't have a 3. So I need to go times by 3 so that that one has a 3, and again in the numerator as well so that it stays equal. And then I'm going to write out what I got. The first one, you're going to have 3/6, and then the second one, you're going to have 2/6. And now that I have that common denominator, now I can add these. So 3 plus 2, you just add up the stuff in the numerators there. 3 plus 2 is 5, so I got 5/6. Denominator stays the same. So that's kind of the simple idea. We're using the exact same steps, but now we're going to start to do some where we have some variables in here. So they're a little bit tougher. So looking at number 1, we got that right there. So what we want to do is, if we can, factor all the numerators and denominators. So 5a I could break apart into 5 times a. 2a I could break apart into 2 times a. And then this a cubed you could break apart into 3a's, but I'm just going to leave it as a cubed. So step number 2 now would be on our restrictions. So in the denominator, like 5a, that cannot equal 0. Divide both sides by 5, so a cannot equal 0. Or from this one, 2a cannot equal 0. That'll actually just give you the same thing. So 2a does not equal 0. Divide both sides by 2. a does not equal 0. And then this last one, if you had a cubed not equaling 0, you could take the cube root of both sides, and then you'd have a cannot equal 0 as well. So all of those give the exact same thing, so the only restriction you need to write is just a cannot equal 0. So to save some room, I'm just going to erase this stuff out of the way, and I'm just going to keep that one right there. So a cannot equal 0. So step 2 is now done. Now we can go on to step 3, where we got to simplify if possible. And none of these fractions that we have here, I can do any simplifying, so I'm done that. On to step 4, find a common denominator. So if one term is missing something that the other terms have, we need to write that in. So I'm going to just pull this up here, and I'm going to write out the terms that we had, but I'm going to put some space in between so that I can put in the terms that are missing from each one. So I've got all my terms here now. Now each one of these is missing something that the other one doesn't have. So like this one has a 5 and the other ones don't have a 5. So I'm going to have to multiply all of the other ones by 5 so that they all have a 5. So now all of them have 5s. This one's got an A, but the other ones already have A's, so I'm good there. This one's got a 2 and the other ones don't have 2's. So I'm going to have to multiply this by a 2, multiply that by a 2. This one also doesn't have a 2, so I'll have to multiply that by a 2. And now looking at this final denominator, that one has 3 a's. So I got to make sure the other ones also have 3 a's. This one's got 1. I got to add on 2 more, so an a squared. Remember, numerator and denominator. and then this one's got 1, so we need 2 more as well. So we got to add the a squared there. And now that I have that, now I can multiply all this out, and I'm going to have a common denominator in the bottom. So this top one, 4 times 2a squared, that's going to be 8a squared over multiplying this. That'll give me 10a cubed. Next one, multiply that. We got 15a squared over, multiply that. We're going to get 10a cubed. And then the last one, 1 times 5 times 2, that's just 10 over, and we're going to get that same common denominator. So now that I got that same common denominator, I can actually add them all up. So I'm going to write one big fraction where it has that same common denominator of 10a cubed, and then in the numerator I can write out what we had in the numerators. So it was 8a squared minus 15a squared plus 10. And then these terms I can simplify and put together. So 8a squared minus 15a squared, that's just going to equal negative 7a squared plus that 10, and then all of that being divided by 10a cubed still. So we've now done every step except step 6. We got to make sure to simplify at the end. If you could maybe factor this part maybe one more time, try factoring it, but in this case we can't factor it. Sometimes you might be able to like pull out an a, and then you might have like an a cancel in numerator and denominator, so make sure you always remember to factor at the very end. Number 2 here now, we got that. So with this one, I can see the denominator is 4m minus 3, and the other denominator is actually the same thing. So I already have a common denominator, and there's no factoring that I can do down there. Same with the numerators, there's no factoring that I can do. So I'm going to do my restrictions right away. And I only have to do one of these denominators because they're the exact same. So my restrictions, I'm going to have to take 4m minus 3 and say that cannot equal 0. So add 3 to both sides. You'll get 4m cannot equal 3. And then divide both sides by a 4. You'll get m cannot equal 3 over 4. So our restrictions are done. We can go up and start to work on the question. So we said we already had a common denominator. So I'm going to write my common denominator. It was just 4m minus 3. In the numerator, I had a 10m minus 1, and then we had minus 8 minus m. So I'm going to go minus, and then make sure you put brackets, 8 minus m, because we were subtracting that whole thing. Because now this negative is going to distribute into our brackets, and it's going to change the signs. So I'm actually going to have 10m minus 1, and then minus an 8, and then this minus minus is going to give me positive m. And then that's all being divided by 4m minus 3. So in the numerator now, I can put the 10m and the plus m together. That is going to give me 11m. And then the minus 1 and the minus 8, put those together, I'll have minus 9. And again, over that same denominator, 4m minus 3. So now that I've gotten this, I could try to factor the numerator or the denominator, but I can't do any factoring, so I won't be able to do any simplifying. I can't do like 9 divided by 3. You can never just cancel like one term with another term. You got to have like an entire factor in brackets canceling out with an entire factor in brackets in the denominator. Okay, so I can't cancel the 9 or the 3. So that is our answer. Number 3 here now. So this one we got a little bit more going on, and we don't have a common denominator. So what I'm going to do first is we're going to factor everything. This right here, you actually can't factor it, so it's just going to stay the same, y squared minus 20 divided by. This right here though, y squared minus 4, that is actually a difference of squares. So it's going to be y minus 2 and a y plus 2. Then we had plus, and the y minus 2 can't do any simplifying there, so it stays the same. And then same with the denominator there, can't simplify that. So now that everything is factored, I'm going to do my restrictions over here on the left. So this y minus 2, I'm going to say that cannot equal 0. Y minus 2 cannot equal 0. Add a 2 onto both sides, so y cannot equal a 2. So that one is pretty simple. And then we'll take this one, y plus 2. So y plus 2 cannot equal 0. minus a 2 from both sides, and you'll get y cannot equal negative 2. So those are our two restrictions. If you wanted to write it even simpler, you could say y does not equal a positive or negative 2. That would just be combining those two together. And then I don't need to box these other two because they're both contained within that one restriction. So back to our adding now. So we have a y minus 2 and a y plus 2 in this one, but the other one only has a y plus 2. So it is missing a y minus 2. So I'm going to multiply it by a y minus 2 so that it has the same factors, and that'll give us a common denominator. Remember, you got to do it in the denominator and in the numerator. And then what I would do is I'd put these in brackets just so you don't make a mistake when you do your multiplying. We're going to have to FOIL those. So the first term I can just rewrite. We had y squared minus 20 over y minus 2 and y plus 2. Then we're going to have plus, and then with this here we're going to have to do all of our FOILing. So we're going to have 4 multiplications. So when we do that, we're going to get a y squared minus 4y plus 4. If you want to check my math, you can check my math, but you should get that. And then the denominator one here, don't do any multiplying there, just leave it as it is. So y plus 2 and y minus 2, because I just worked at getting those two factors so that they matched up with this other one. So don't multiply this out. So now that we do have the common denominator, let's write one big fraction and put our y plus 2 and our y minus 2. And then in the numerator, we can put out the terms that we had. So we had a y squared minus 20. When you have a plus, this is going to be easier because it's not going to change any of the signs. It's not like the previous one where we had to put it in brackets and then we distributed the negative. You can just add the terms that we had. So we had a y squared, a minus 4y, and a plus 4. And then simplifying in the numerator, we'll draw our big fraction. The denominator is not going to change, so if you guys want to use these two kind of quotations, that's just a quick way to represent that it didn't change. It's the same thing. In the numerator though, I'm going to put the y squared and the y squared together. So I have 2y squared. Then I have a minus 4y, so let's write that, minus 4y. And then the minus 20 and the plus 4 I can put together, and that's going to give me minus 16. So now that I've added that all together and I've simplified it, remember our last step was always to check and see if you can simplify even further. So we want to factor what we have here and see if there's any terms that are going to cancel. So we're going to factor the numerator. So I see I can pull a 2 out from all the terms. So I'll have y squared minus 2y minus 8 left over. And then the denominator is still going to be the same thing. So I'm just going to keep it as it is. I put those quotations. And then this right here, we're going to try to factor using our product and our sum. So it's got to have a product of negative 8 and a sum of negative 2. So the two numbers that are going to do that are a negative 4 and a plus 2. So I'm going to have 2, and then we're going to have y minus 4 and y plus 2. And then all that is being divided by the same thing in the bottom, but now I'm going to write it out. It was a y plus 2 and a y minus 2. Okay, and the reason I wrote it out this time is because the y plus 2 and the y plus 2 are actually going to cancel out. And so when I do that, I'm going to get just a 2 and a y minus 4 in the numerator, and in the denominator I just have a y minus 2. And then that right there is your answer. If you wanted to simplify or multiply this in, you could, but you wouldn't have to. You could just keep it as that. Number 4 here now, this one actually has 3 different terms. So 1, 2, 3 terms. We got a plus and a minus. So first step always, we got to factor. So in the first one, 3 we can't factor. In the denominator there though, x squared minus 9, that's a difference of squares. So it's an x minus 3 and an x plus 3. Now, a big hint when you guys are doing these questions, if you get some factors looking like this, most likely you're going to see those factors somewhere else. So I see that one there, and I'm probably going to get one of those here as well. Okay, so that's just a hint. With the next one, we had the 6, and then being divided by. To factor this, we need a product of 9 and a sum of negative 6. So that is going to be a negative 3 and a negative 3. So there's those factors popping up again that are the same. And then the last one can't do any factoring there, so it can just stay as what it is. So now that everything's factored, I can do my restrictions. So my restrictions, take all the denominators, set them not equal to 0. So with the first one, x minus 3, that cannot equal 0. Add 3 to both sides, so x cannot equal 3. With the next one, x plus 3 cannot equal 0. Minus 3 from both sides, and you'll get x cannot equal a negative 3. And then with this last one, that just repeats, and these ones also repeat the ones that we've already done. So to combine those two restrictions into one, I'm just going to say x cannot equal a positive or a negative 3. So going back to this here up top, now that we have everything factored, we can try to find a common denominator. So this has an x minus 3 and an x plus 3. So I got to make sure all the other ones have the exact same. So this one has an x minus 3, but it's missing an x plus 3. So I'm just going to put in the x plus 3. Also do that in the numerator there. And then this last one, it has an x minus 3, but it is missing an x plus 3. So let's add in the x plus 3. And again in the numerator as well. Looking at this one here now, it's got two x minus 3's and an x plus 3. So this one only has one x minus 3, and same with this one. So those ones both need to be given another x minus 3. Let's squeeze that in there. Remember in the top two. And then this one also needs the x minus 3. So now that we got that, we can start to multiply the numerators. So the first one here, that is going to give me 3x minus 9. Then I got plus 6 times x plus 3, so that's going to give me 6x plus 18. Then I got minus, and I'm going to put in brackets all of this. So I am going to FOIL this out here first. I'll do that, and then after I'll multiply by a 2. So when I do the FOILing, again, you could check my math. We're going to get x squared minus 9. And then that's in brackets. I'm just going to use some square brackets, and then we got our last round bracket. And then all of that is over the common denominator that we just got. It was x minus 3, another x minus 3, and then an x plus 3. So in the numerator, I can put some terms together, like these two I can put together, and the 9 and the 18, I can put those together. And I'm also going to multiply this 2 into here, and then after I'm going to have to distribute the negative. So putting the x's together, 3x and 6x, I'm going to get 9x. Putting the negative 9 and the positive 18 together, that's going to give me 9. And then I had minus 2 times x squared is 2x squared, and then 2 times negative 9 is negative 18. That's all being divided by, I'm just going to put in quotations because it's the same thing. And then simplifying the top, we're going to bring in this negative. So I'm going to have 9x plus 9, and then minus 2x squared, and plus 18. And again, that's all divided by the exact same thing in the denominator. So the only thing left I can do is this 9 and this 18. I can put those two together. So let's do that here. We got the minus 2x squared, we'll write first. Then we had a 9x, we'll write that second. And then the 9 and the 18, putting that together, we're going to get 27. And then all of that is being divided by that same common denominator. I'm just going to move everything up here so I got a little bit more room. Slide that up. So the common denominator was an x minus 3, an x minus 3, and an x plus 3. Make sure in your final answer that you actually write out what the denominator is. Don't use the quotations for your final answer. Looking at number 5, this one I want you guys to try to do. So if you want to pause the video and then try this one, you can do that now. So the answer to that one now here is that right there. So that's all the work for it. If you need to pause to check over, you can pause the video now and check your answer for number 5. So we're going to move on to our last one now, number 6. So this one actually has a lot of different fractions going on, so we're going to have to be careful with this one. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to find a common denominator with these two pieces here in the numerator, and then in the denominator we're going to try to find a common denominator there as well. So first thing though, looking at all the terms that we have, none of these terms I can factor, so I can start to do my restrictions here right away. So I'm going to do my restrictions just down here. So from this y, that y is in a denominator. That one's going to be simple. It's going to give me that y cannot equal 0. This one right here is going to give me the exact same thing. But then this whole thing right here, that is also in a denominator. It's dividing right there. So that whole thing cannot equal 0. So bringing that one down, I'm going to have y minus 4 over y cannot equal 0. So this one's a little tougher. So we need to isolate and solve for y. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to move this minus 4y to the other side. And when it moves over, the sign will change. So I'll have a positive 4 over y. And then I want to get rid of this y in the denominator. So to do that, I'll multiply by a y. But if I do that on the right, I got to do it on the left. And then these will cancel. So on the left, we got y times y. That's y squared. And on the right, we just have a 4. And then last step, we just got to take the square root to get rid of that square. So we got y does not equal. And when you take the square root, remember, that's going to give you a positive and a negative. So y cannot equal a positive or a negative 2. So those are our restrictions. Back to actually simplifying what we had up top here now. What I'm going to do is I'm going to rewrite the numerator. So 2 minus 4 over y. And then I'm going to put that all in brackets. And then I'm going to put divide, but I'm doing it a little bit differently. So I'm writing the divide symbol. And then in the denominator, we had y minus 4 over y, and then put that in brackets. So in each of these brackets now, I'm going to try to find a common denominator and then simplify. So this one's got a y in the denominator. This one has a hidden 1 there. So I'm going to have to add a y into that one and then multiply in the top by y. This one has a y in the denominator, and same kind of thing. It has a 1 in the denominator, so we got to add a y, and then again do it in the numerator as well. So when I multiply that out now, I'm going to have right here 2 times y, that'll give me 2y over a y, minus the 4y, that's all in brackets, divided by y times y is just y squared over y, minus the 4y. And that too is also in brackets. So now that we got the common denominator, we can actually put our numerators together. So that's just going to be a 2y minus 4, all being divided by a y. And that's in brackets. Divided by, this one we got y squared minus 4. So y squared minus 4, all being divided by the y. And that is now in brackets. So looking at these numerators, there's nothing I can do to simplify these, but I can factor them. So I'm going to factor those to see what it's going to give me. So the first one, I can pull a 2 out, and I'm going to have a y minus 2 left over divided by y. And then in our second term, this is actually a difference of squares. So it's going to give me a y minus 2 and a y plus 2. And again, all being divided by a y. So now that we've gotten to this, we can't do any canceling, but this division here, we never wanted to do division. We always want to change that to multiplication. So to do that, you rewrite the first term. So everything stays the same in this first term, and then change to multiplication, and then this one is going to flip. So we take the reciprocal. So I'm going to have a y in the numerator, and then in the denominator, I got a y minus 2 and a y plus 2. And now I'm going to be able to do some canceling. So this y can cancel with this y, again, only because there's multiplication in between. If this is a plus or a divide or anything else, you can't do it. It has to be a multiplication. And then this y minus 2 can cancel with this y minus 2. So all that we have left, in the numerator there is a 2, and in the denominator there is a y plus 2. So that was our last one. Next up, we just got our homework questions. So we're working on page 337.